All right, let me bring on our next storyteller. Here is A. Jordan Lambert with I Was a Natural Disaster.
I sat down multiple times and tried to write something pretty and simple that made sense and told my story. But every time I sat down, I couldn't do it. The words wouldn't come, and my thoughts ended up all over the place, which is pretty fitting because that's kind of how living with anxiety and depression are every single day. I almost drowned once. That's not non sequitur. I know it seems like it. I'm going somewhere, just trust me. I was 2 years old, and I fell in the pool. I remember everything about it vividly. My whole life flashed before my eyes in black and white. There was water everywhere. I opened my mouth to try and scream and let someone know it was happening, and it filled with water. There was pressure all over my body. It wasn't until my mom looked in the pool and saw me at the bottom that someone knew something was happening. It wasn't unlike having anxiety. Anxiety feels like what I imagine a flood feels like. The first time I can ever remember having anxiety about something was in the second grade over standardized testing. Our teacher kept telling us how important it was to our future and how we needed to be on time and be focused and eat a good breakfast, and college admissions depended on this, and we were in second grade. I felt nervous and anxious, and there was pressure all over it, and the next thing you know, I was so sick that I couldn't go take the test. It was like a flood. Tests in school were floods. Meeting new people, flood. Being pushed into new situations, floods. Someone saying, "We need to talk," without any further explanation, flood. Going back to work after I've had a week-long vacation, flood. Driving down the 605 freeway, definitely a flood. And I have to do that to get to work every single day. Anxiety is my own personal flood, and just like drowning, it generally happens to people without anyone else knowing what's going on. If anxiety is a flood, then depression is a landslide. One rock here, two rocks there, until suddenly everything's moving and coming down and it can't be controlled. Gravity is the primary force for a landslide, but there are outside contributing factors. Very similarly, whatever chemical imbalance I inherited from some ancestor of mine is the primary contributing force to my depression, but there are outside factors. It hasn't rained in a few months, my friends aren't returning my text messages, my favorite barista lost his job and no one else makes my coffee the same way. I'm making things up, but you get the picture. When Donald Trump is president and someone stole my car from outside my house, depression is depression, but the rocks in my head start to tumble down and they start a fucking landslide. You know, people say that quicksand isn't as big of a problem as they thought it would be based on cartoons and TV shows, but I am willing to bet that those people do not live with anxiety and depression, because that is like being trapped in quicksand. You are buzzing and moving and you're hyper and you're struggling and you're anxious, and then depression comes along and just says, nah. And then you're slow and you can't move and you're stuck, and all the moving in the world won't get you out of the quicksand. I was in my 20s and had been living like this for a decade before I realized that I had a problem. I thought I had things under control. And then I fell into a sinkhole. Now, sinkholes happen when there's a lot of water and really soluble land, and the water is just too much pressure for the land, so the land just falls and creates a hole. So water, land, sinkhole. Anxiety, depression, my whole life fell apart. Daddy issues, low self-esteem, codependent relationships, emotional abuse, a job I hated, deaths in my family, on and on ad nauseum until it was too much, the flood was never ending, the landslides had resulted in not enough hard soil, and all of a sudden, boom, a sinkhole, a fucking sinkhole. And I was laying at the bottom of it. And I laid there for a long time before I entered therapy and was given the tools to climb out. And guess what? When I got out of the sinkhole, there was a rainbow after the rain. It was beautiful. It's the life that I have now, with family and friends and beautiful relationships and a job that I love and a full social calendar and coping strategies and a therapist that still responds to my text messages even though I stopped seeing her over a year ago. Sitting down to write this was not easy. It was very difficult, and I put it off to the last minute. Getting up here to talk about it is even worse. But It shouldn't have to be. It should be like talking about the weather. People die from things like this. They commit suicide, their health fails, and they die. And everyone says, oh, I had no idea something was wrong, or don't be afraid to ask for help. But how can you ask somebody for help if you can't talk about it? I want talking about anxiety and depression to be as mundane as talking about the weather. If there was a fucking sinkhole on Fairfax and La Cienega, people would be talking about it. It'd be all over the news. If there was a flood at the LA River, everyone would know about it. If you went out for a hike and you got stuck in quicksand, that shit would be all over your Instagram story. And if your head weather is that bad, you should feel free enough to say something. It shouldn't get to the point where you are laying at the bottom of your own sinkhole, looking up at the sky, going, how the fuck did this happen? You should not have to become a natural disaster. Thank you.